The biggest kid in school shoved me into a locker and trashed my stuff because he thinks that I am just a quiet kid. He found out the hard way not to mess with me. I transferred to Ridgemont High 3 weeks into the fall semester because my dad got relocated for work. I didn't want to move. I had friends, a training gym 10 minutes away, and a routine. My dad's company moved him 4 states over, and I didn't have a choice, so I showed up to a new school knowing nobody. I'm 5'6" and 140 pounds. I keep my hair short, I wear plain clothes, and I don't talk much when I don't know people. I look like the kind of kid who sits in the back and doesn't bother anyone, which is exactly what I did on my first day. That's when I met Wade. Wade was 6'2", 220 pounds, and he ran the hallway between the gym and the science wing like it was his living room. He had 2 guys on him at all times. Felix carried Wade's gym bag for him like it was a privilege. Ducky's only purpose was laughing on cue. First day, 4th period, Wade stepped directly into my path and didn't move. I tried to go around him. He stepped in front of me again. I said, "Excuse me." He put his hand flat on my chest and shoved me backward into the lockers. The back of my head hit metal, and the sound rang down the whole hallway. He leaned in. "Transferees don't last long here, just so you know." Ducky was already laughing before they turned the corner. The next day, Wade knocked my lunch tray out of my hands in the cafeteria, spaghetti and milk all over the floor, and didn't look back. The day after, he took my backpack off my chair during study hall and dropped it in the trash by the door, then told the teacher I was disrupting class. The teacher told me to sit down. He flicked the back of my head during an assembly hard enough that the kid next to me flinched. He did all of it where teachers could see, and nobody said a word because Wade's dad sat on the school board and everyone knew the math. I kept quiet, not because I was scared. I've trained judo since I was 7. I won my age division at nationals at 14. I train 4 days a week with people who compete internationally. My coach Mustafa is a former Olympic alternate, and the things my hands and hips can do to a human body are not for hallways, so I let it slide until Wade made a mistake. Gym class had a wrestling station on the mats. Voluntary, partner up, or run laps. Most kids ran laps. Wade saw me tying my shoes near the mat and pointed at me loud enough for the whole gym to hear. "I'll go with the new kid. Somebody has to teach him how things work around here." The coach asked if I was okay with it. I said sure. 30 kids on the bleachers, 10 more along the wall. Wade grabbed the front of my shirt with both hands and tried to yank me toward him. I let him. I stepped in, dropped my weight, turned my hip into his center, grabbed sleeve and collar, and hit an ogoshi so clean Mustafa would have bowed. Wade's feet left the ground. His body went over my hip and he landed flat on his back so hard the sound echoed off the gym walls. Every person in that room stopped. He got up slow, face red, came at me again, and I hit a Kosoto Gari and swept his back leg, and he went down harder than the first time. The gym went dead silent. Nobody laughed, nobody clapped, they just stared. That night I called Mustafa. I expected him to say good job. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You kept your composure on the mat. That's good. But now you've shown him what you are, and a dog that gets embarrassed bites harder. Stay sharp." That was it. No congratulations. Just a warning. The next morning I got to school early to grab my history textbook. I dialed the combo, pulled the handle, and the door swung open and my chest went tight. Everything inside was destroyed. My textbooks were shredded. Not just ripped, but torn apart page by page, like someone had sat there and done it by hand. My gym clothes were soaked in something that burned my nose the second the door opened. Bleach. The fabric was already turning white in spots and the whole locker reeked so bad my eyes watered. The 4 photos I'd taped to the inside of the door were gone. One of me and my old training partners after we won team at regionals. One of me and Mustafa after my first national win. 2 from my old school with my friends. All 4 torn into little pieces, scattered at the bottom of the locker like confetti, and across the inside of the door, in thick black marker, "Lucky shot." I picked up a torn piece of the regionals photo. I could see half of my face and the arm of the guy who used to be my main training partner. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from how hard I was working. To stay still. Every single thing Mustafa ever taught me about control was being tested right there at that locker. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Kalani, a girl from my history class. "You need to report this." I didn't turn around. I just kept looking at the pieces of my photos sitting in a puddle of bleach. "To who?" "His dad runs the school board." She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. We both knew how it worked. I cleaned the locker out myself. The photos I kept, even torn up, those were mine, and Wade didn't get to decide what I threw away. Felix walked past while I was pulling the last of the wet paper out and bumped my shoulder on purpose. "Wade says the mat was a fluke. He says you know it too." I didn't look at him. I zipped my bag, closed the locker, and walked to class. At lunch, Wade sat 3 tables away and stared at me the entire period. Not glaring, watching. Felix kept glancing at him sideways. Ducky picked at his food. The whole table was dead silent, and honestly, that silence scared me more than anything Wade had done before. Loud Wade was just a temper. Quiet Wade was strategy. He was planning. The next day, I started watching the space around him the way I'd studied tape before a tournament, and the first thing I noticed changed everything. Wade never operated where there were cameras. The main hallway had 2 cameras. Wade never touched anyone there. The hallway by the gym had no camera at all. There was an empty bracket where one used to be. The cafeteria camera pointed at the exit doors, not the tables. Every single thing he'd done to me had happened in a dead zone. He'd mapped the blind spots in that school the same way I'd map an opponent's weaknesses, and his dad's position on the board kept the adults from closing the gap. I started eating lunch with Kalani every day, and it turned out she knew everything about everyone. I asked her about Wade, not what he'd done to me, but what he'd done before me. She put her fork down. "Wade's been doing this to every new student for 3 years. A kid last year transferred out after 1 semester. Wade made his life so bad his mom pulled him out. Nobody did anything. His dad donated the new gym. He's on the school board. The principal won't touch him. Everyone knows the deal." She said it the way you tell someone the cafeteria is out of chocolate milk. Just a fact. This wasn't a kid with a bad attitude. This was a system. That night I called my dad. Omar picked up on the first ring and I could tell he was paying attention. He asked how school was and it sounded like a real question, not the automatic kind. I told him it was fine. He wasn't buying it. He said, "Talk to me." So I did. I told him about Wade. Light at first, then heavier, then the locker, the shredded textbooks, the bleach, the torn photos, the 2 words on the door. The line went quiet, not Mustafa quiet, where he's thinking. Omar quiet, where he's angry and deciding what to do. When he spoke, his voice was low and tight. "I didn't move this his family across the country so my son could be terrorized. I'm calling the school. I told him not yet. His dad on the board would steer the meeting and we'd come out worse. There was a long pause. Then, you have 1 week. Then I'm handling it my way. His voice left zero room for argument. The next evening, I asked Mustafa what you do when someone keeps coming at you and you can't walk away. He looked at me a long time. Then he said, you don't go to them. You make them come to you on your ground, on your terms, at the time you choose. That's not fighting. That's strategy. I noticed something else at school that day. Wade got loud near the water fountain and Felix flinched. Full body flinch, shoulders up, head pulled back. Later, when Wade shoved his chair back fast in the cafeteria, Ducky turned his whole head away like a reflex. Felix and Ducky weren't his crew. They were afraid of him. And fear breaks the second something stronger shows up. I had 4 days left on my dad's clock when the school flipped on me. Kids who'd been nodding at me in the halls started looking at the floor when I walked past. Kalani was waiting at my locker, arms tight across her chest. And before I said good morning, she told me Wade was spreading that I took steroids. He'd told Felix to leak it to the coaches. The ground tilted under my feet. The accusation was false, but it didn't matter. In judo, that word follows you. Tournament officials hear it. Coaches hear it. It gets into the background noise of your career and never leaves. Wade hadn't just picked a lie. He'd picked the one lie that could damage me past graduation. I went to the gym teacher's office. He listened, said he saw the grappling and that was skill not drugs, and advised me to stay away from Wade. That was the help. Another adult choosing the easy door. At lunch, Kalani didn't show. After school, my phone buzzed. She wrote that she was sorry. She couldn't let Wade go after her cousin, who was only a freshman. I typed back that I understood. Keep her safe. I meant it. Wade had figured out his real weapon, not size, knowing who to threaten to make people fall in line. He'd used a 14-year-old to peel off the one person willing to sit next to me, and I was alone again, like the first day, except now I knew what it felt like to have someone in my corner and lose it. That afternoon, I cut through the cameraless hallway by the gym, and Felix stepped out at the far end, hands in pockets, blocking the way. I turned around and Ducky was already at the other end, same pose. Wade came around the corner and stopped 2 feet in front of me. He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. That little judo trick isn't going to work again. Next time we go, it's my rules, and there's no mat and no teacher. I said nothing. I kept my weight centered and watched the spot below his chin, the way you watch an opponent's chest in a match. He shoved me hard into the lockers, harder than the first time. My head bounced off the metal. I stayed on my feet. I didn't swing. He leaned in close enough that I could smell cafeteria food on his breath. My dad already knows your name. One phone call and you're expelled for fighting. Think real hard about what you want to do here. Then he walked away. Felix fell in behind him. Ducky followed. I made myself count to 10 before I moved. That night I almost told my dad everything. 3 days left on the deadline. I came home and he was at the dining table with his coffee and he looked at me and said, talk to me. All of it was at my throat. The steroids rumor, Kalani being threatened, the shove, the expulsion threat. I wanted to dump every piece of it on that table and let my dad handle it because I was tired of carrying it alone. But I knew what would happen. Omar would be at the school by morning. Wade's dad would be in a suit across the principal's table. And my father would get steamrolled by a system designed to protect Wade. So I looked at him and said, I have a plan. I just need until Monday. He held my eyes a long time. Worry and trust fighting each other behind them. Monday, not 1 day more. And if you come home with a single bruise, the deal is off and I'm at that school by morning. I went to my room and called Mustafa and told him everything. He said, come to the gym in the morning, early. I showed up at 7. He didn't drill throws. He sat me down and told me about a tournament he lost at 19 because his opponent got in his head before the match. His coach told him afterward, the person who controls the environment controls the outcome. Then he smiled. Now let me tell you what we're going to do about Monday. The plan was clean. I'd request a supervised grappling session in gym class, a controlled demonstration with Mustafa present as a credentialed guest instructor. Wade wouldn't be able to claim a fluke with an Olympic alternate watching, and if he lost his temper, the principal would see it. Monday morning, I sat through first period feeling ready. Then the intercom clicked on. The office voice came through flat and official. All physical contact activities in gym were suspended for the rest of the semester due to a parent complaint citing student safety concerns. She said it like she was reading the lunch menu. My phone buzzed under the desk. Kalani, Wade's dad, called the school, said the wrestling station was dangerous. They shut it down. I went to the parking lot and Mustafa was already there, leaning against his truck in his coaching jacket. The receptionist had turned him away with a polite little script. Somebody had told her exactly what to say before he arrived. The whole plan, gone before 9:30 on a Monday morning. Mustafa watched me process it. His father's got the school locked down. You can't fight this from inside the building. You need to change the ground. I looked at him. What do you mean change the ground? He stepped closer, his voice dropping into the low, steady tone he uses when he's teaching something important. Stop trying to beat him at his school. Make him come to yours. We sat in my car for almost an hour, and then I remembered the fall showcase. Every fall, the school hosts a Saturday showcase in the main gym. Clubs and student organizations doing demonstrations for parents and community members. Any student can sign up. It's open to the public. The principal couldn't shut closed doors when there were no closed doors, and Wade's dad couldn't cancel it without pulling his son out of a school event in front of every parent in the district. The showcase was the following Saturday, 6 days away. I told Mustafa the plan and he listened and was quiet for 10 seconds and then nodded. That's your ground. What do you need from me? I needed him there in his coaching jacket with his credentials visible, so when I did my demonstration, everyone in that gym would know this was trained, legitimate, real. He said he'd be there. I went to the office that afternoon, grabbed the sign-up form, wrote judo technique demonstration, and on the partner line wrote volunteer from the audience and handed it in. No flags, no questions. I called Omar and told him the new plan. He went quiet, then said Saturday. He'd be there, but Monday morning he was still calling that school. I said it would work. That night I texted Kalani what I was doing. She wrote back that Wade would show up. He showed up to everything. He thought the school was his. I smiled for the first time in weeks and typed back 2 words. I'm counting on it. The week between Monday and Saturday lasted a year. Wade kept the pressure on every day. Shoulder checks, whispered threats. On Wednesday, he told my chemistry lab partner I was dangerous and unpredictable, and she asked the teacher to switch groups. I let every bit of it roll off me because I knew what was coming. Every night I trained with Mustafa. He didn't drill throws. He walked circles around me on the mat, asking questions, trying to break my focus. He was training composure. Saturday morning, I pulled my G out of the closet for the first time since the move, tied my belt, and stood in front of the mirror in my room. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself. The gym was packed by noon. Parents 3 rows deep in the bleachers, kids running around, teachers along the walls with coffee cups, the science club's volcano in one corner, the dance squad doing a routine to some pop song. I set up my mat in the center of the gym with Mustafa next to me in his Navy coaching jacket, credentials embroidered on the chest, arms behind his back, chin up. I found Omar in the bleachers 5 rows up and he gave me a nod. I started solo. Practice dummy in the middle of the mat. Ogoshi first because it's clean and visual. Then hip throws, then break falls. People gathered, polite clapping. Nothing crazy. That was the setup. When I finished, I walked to the small mic stand the organizers had set up, picked it up, and looked out at the crowd. Judo is about using someone's energy against them. It works best when your opponent is bigger and stronger than you. I need a volunteer who's willing to try. I didn't look at Wade. I knew where he was. Far wall, Felix on his left, Ducky on his right, arms crossed, trying to look bored. Heads in the crowd started turning toward him because every kid in that school knew the story from gym class. Someone yelled, "Wade, get up there!" Then another, then another. It spread like a ripple and the room went quiet, waiting. He couldn't back down. Not here. Not with parents watching and his name in the air. He uncrossed his arms and stepped forward and his voice carried across the gym. "Yeah, I'll go. Let's see if your little trick works twice." He walked onto the mat like he owned it. Mustafa stepped between us before Wade could reach me and his voice cut clean through the noise. "For safety, I'll be refereeing. Standard grappling rules. No strikes. Tap or I stop it. Understood?" Wade looked at him like a speed bump. "Whatever, old man." Mustafa didn't react. He turned to me and gave me one small nod. We squared up. Wade lunged, both hands on my collar, trying to muscle me straight down like he was pushing a shopping cart. Pure size, no technique. I didn't resist. I moved with his weight, dropped my hips, turned my back into his chest, grabbed his sleeve with my left hand and his collar with my right, loaded him onto my back like a backpack, and pulled. Sioy Naj. His feet came off the ground completely and his whole body went over my shoulder and he landed flat on his back with a sound that bounced off every wall. The room erupted. I stepped back and reset. He got up faster this time, eyes already wild, and charged me straight ahead with his weight high and his balance gone before he touched me. I waited for his front foot to plant, hooked my right leg behind his left, drove my hip across his center. Harai Goshi. His legs swept out from under him and he went down so hard the mat slid 2 inches across the gym floor. The crowd was on its feet. He got up and his eyes weren't angry anymore. They were wild, unhinged, the look of a person who has lost control of the only thing that ever made him feel powerful. He lunged at me and shoved me hard with both hands, open palm straight to my chest, and I stumbled back 2 steps. Clear strike, clear violation. Then he cocked his fist back. He pulled his right arm back like he was about to throw a punch right there in front of parents and teachers and the principal. Mustafa moved faster than I've ever seen him move. He stepped between us, hand flat on Wade's chest, voice steady and final. "It's over. You're done." Wade screamed. Not yelled, screamed. "Get off me. Do you know who my dad is?" The gym went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence where you could hear the air conditioning humming. Every parent heard it. Every teacher heard it. The principal, 20 feet from the mat near the scorer's table, heard it. A kid half his size had just beaten him clean, twice, in a supervised demonstration with a credentialed coach refereeing, and his response was a thrown punch and his father's name. The wildness drained out of his eyes and something else replaced it. He looked around and for the first time he actually saw the room. Parents with their arms around their kids, teachers shaking their heads, the principal walking toward the mat with a look on her face that said this was no longer something she could handle in an email. He looked to his left for Felix, and Felix was staring at the floor. He wouldn't look up. He looked to his right for Ducky, and Ducky had backed up 3 full steps and was standing near the bleachers with his hands at his sides like he wanted to be anywhere else. Nobody was on Wade's side. For the first time in 3 years at that school, Wade was standing completely alone. Omar stood up from the bleachers. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked down the steps one at a time and crossed the gym floor with the kind of calm that fills a room without making a sound. He stepped onto the mat and put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything yet. He just stood there, and that was enough. Mustafa looked at Wade and said, quiet, almost gentle, "That's what losing looks like when you never learned how to do it." The principal reached the mat. Tall woman in a blazer. She stopped 3 feet from Wade and looked at him the way you look at a problem you've been putting off. "My office, Monday morning, with your father." Wade opened his mouth. I could see him trying to form words. Something his dad would say, something to spin it. Nothing came out. His mouth closed. He turned and walked toward the doors, and for the first time in the weeks I'd known him, nobody followed. Felix stayed by the wall, still looking at the floor. Ducky stayed by the bleachers. Wade pushed through the double doors and walked out alone. Then I heard clapping from the bleachers and Kalani was up there, 5 rows up, sitting next to a younger girl who had to be her cousin, hands red from how hard she was clapping. A kid I'd never spoken to walked up to the edge of the mat, small, maybe a freshman, voice shaky. "Thank you. He took my stuff last year and nobody cared." Then another. Then another. Kids I didn't know telling me pieces of the same story, all with the same ending. Nobody did anything, until now. I looked at Omar. His eyes were wet, not crying, but right there on the edge. He was smiling, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen since before the move. He squeezed my shoulder. "That's my son." I looked down at the mat under my feet, the same kind of surface where Mustafa first taught me how to fall and how to get back up and how to use what I have without becoming something I'm not. I put my feet together and bowed, deep and slow and real.